This podcast is a project of the Climate Designers Network.
Hey, this is Eric. Welcome to another episode of Climify. Thanks for being patient the past 2 weeks as I was away on summer vacation and simply wanted to disconnect and get out into the world. But I'm back with a great guest today who focuses on the drawdown solution sector of buildings, or in particular, net zero architecture. Before we get into the conversation, I wanted to give you a quick announcement. 3 episodes ago, I spoke with Rebecca Mendez and Holly Robbins about teaching sustainable design, with a promise there would be a follow-up event sponsored by the AIGA Design Educators community. Well, currently, that event is scheduled to be a live one on Saturday, August 12th. It'll be online, and you can get more notice here and over at educators.aiga.org about the time and registration information. Well, my guest today is Paula Huerta, an architect originally from Spain who now lives and practices net zero architecture in Indonesia. Like many of you, I always strive to live and work with as small as an ecological footprint as I can, hoping one day in the future I can make a positive impact. But I fall short every day. Part of that is where and how I live. My home has too many trees for solar on the roof, but I still want to minimize my greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible. I could get a heat pump, and I will. I could do a lot of things, which our guest today digs into. What's really vital for me from today's conversation is how I can learn from what Paula does to help my students. I teach a sustainable design capstone course every spring, where a good 25% of the students want to design net zero homes as their thesis. I can point them in a bunch of different directions online, but I really have no idea how to build a net zero home. This discussion and the work Paula has on her website are going to be vital for the success of my students in that class going forward, and hopefully yours too, as getting to net zero requires circular design strategies, and that applies to all design. Incidentally, if you're a homeowner in the US, you can go to whitehouse.gov/clean energy. That's whitehouse.gov/clean energy to get info on how you can get solar, a heat pump, better insulation, and receive a healthy tax credit for doing so. And if you're outside of the US, check with your local government on how you can also work toward a net zero home. So, without further ado, Paula, take it away.
Hi, my name is Paula Huerta. I'm a sustainable architect and a circular economy specialist. I live in Lombok, Indonesia, where I'm based now. And you can find me online at paula@bambookstudio.com.
Paula, thanks for coming on Climify. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Eric, for inviting me. It's truly an honor to be here in Climify with you, and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. And I'm glad that despite the time zone differences, we've been able to manage one that works.
Yeah, we made it work.
Yeah, you're like 13 hours ahead of me. Is that accurate?
Right now it's 9 a.m, so I think so.
Yeah.
It's your evening, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's 13 hours. Wow. Well, good morning to you and good day to everyone else who's listening in. I wanted to start with something I'm always intrigued by with people like you who are working in the climate sphere, and that is, how did you get your start in sustainability and climate action, and what really inspired you to get involved?
Well, probably as most people, I was not raised as a climate activist
Yeah.
during the 80s
Me
and
neither.
90s in the Spain. Yeah, I mean, it's quite like a new thing. So my childhood in Spain in the 90s and 80s and 90s, there were a few environmental problems already affecting us. Spain is a very water-stressed country, so we've always been
Yeah.
living with droughts and water scarcity. And I also remember the ozone layer problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was happening during my childhood, and I remember that as a problem, environmental problem, but nothing that really affected me so much as when I studied for my lead exam in 2008. Um, I was blown away to learn that the building stock was the largest single most pollutant sector in the planet. That building used about 40% of global energy, 70% of global electricity, 25% of global water. And this is in a context where I'm working in a corporate, an American corporate called HOK in Singapore.
Mhm.
And I had finished my university like 3 years prior. I had graduated and I had never, ever before heard about this. So I was in
Yeah.
shock. And in my head, all of these ideas and thoughts came, and it was really like a catalyst for me because I understood a few things. The first one was that architects and designers have a fundamental role to play to change things and improve things.
Hey, yes. Yes, we do.
The, yeah. And then, it was the second thing was that, how could it be that I've never heard that? I just recently graduated. That meant that there were like 5 generations of architects older than me, people active working that probably weren't even aware or had no idea about these impacts of their job and their practice. And the third thing was that I finally found something to be passionate about in design. I had been working in HOK in Singapore. We're designing skyscrapers and, big buildings. And it really meant really little design because it was
Yeah.
so based on aesthetics and looks. And um, for once, suddenly, design had a bigger purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I'm with you on
So,
that. That was something
yeah.
that,
And then, yeah, so that's key because for me, it really gave me that passion that I was lacking before.
yeah.
So lead was really my wake up moment. And after that, everything in my career was shaped to just do more. I quit HOK in Singapore after 3 years, went to the UK, did my master's in science at CAT, is the Center of Alternative Technology in Wales, quite a famous place. I
Yeah.
became a sustainable design specialist. Um, Back to Singapore again, worked again in corporate, American corporate for 4 years, but this time was in a more engineering firm called CH2M Hill. Now I think it's Jacobs. Um, and, we were working more in like advanced technology buildings, labs, hospitals, airports, data centers, manufacturing plants, all of them, like big polluter activity buildings.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it's like big monsters, right? So we were doing lead and building energy performance optimizations. Most of them are corporate clients. They pay their bills, their energy bills. So it makes sense for them from their marketing perspective and also financial perspective to want to push a little bit to lower the emissions.
Hmm.
Did that for 4 years. But, honestly, like personally, I'm always in this position where I think I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
Um,
I relate to that.
Yeah, and I feels like, okay, so I'm sitting here in a corporate job, I'm making a lot of money, it's great. I get to tell clients how to improve their buildings and doing lead and that, but I didn't really think that that was going to change the world. There's a lot of
Mhm.
flaws in that exercise. So, 10 years ago, I decided to take a super life change and move to Indonesia, where I started my office now, Bambook Studio. Yeah.
Yeah, listening to your story is a little bit like looking in the mirror for me in that I was working in the corporate world and had that sort of shocking moment as well. And we both went to grad school, right? We both
Mhm.
tried to find answers through some more learning. And I just went to teaching route, and you went to more of that's the big difference, right? Like you're gone to start Bambook Studio, and what's the mission of your studio, and how do you hope it impacts the world?
Yeah. So I've been here in Lombok, Indonesia for almost 10 years. In reality, everything has started because my husband and I, we built a house here in Lombok. We live in a village of 1,000 people, a fisherman
Ooh,
village in
pretty small.
Indonesia. It's really remote, yes.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And, after building our bamboo home, which is like, the most sustainable project you can do, I was my own client. So it's a bit easier when you
Yeah.
know how you want your things to be. So we live in a net zero home. It's mostly off grid. We treat and reuse all of our water. We have implemented literally everything I
Wow.
learned on my master's. We did a lot of effort in restoring our land. It's a big plot, implementing permaculture, and we currently live a super low impact life. So I really felt that transition was, for me, my life, my career, and also to prove that I could walk the talk.
Yeah.
Um, and because of that house, our house, I got more clients. Suddenly, people were like, "Oh, we love your house. Could you do one for me?" And
Yeah, that
that's
makes
really how
sense. Yeah.
Bamboo, yeah, how Bambook started. There wasn't a lot of architects here before, not even now, so many. So, I was in an advantage position. And that's how Bambook came to life. At the beginning was really purely a sustainable design and built a studio. I mean, because I'm a sustainable specialist, of course, I really don't know how to design differently. And this
Yeah.
really goes aligned with a lot of your previous podcasts where you're speaking about whether we are climate designers or not.
Yes,
Um,
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that makes total
yeah,
sense to me.
there's no other way, like for
Yeah.
me, the rules are under the low impact and the sustainability aspect. So when you design, you just follow those rules, same as you need to follow rules for structural or, like any other regulations. I implement my own sustainable regulations in my designs,
I do too.
but it
I add
makes,
like an extra layer,
yeah,
right? So it's
but it
with the
makes
extra
sense.
yeah.
I mean, if you're aware of what it is, wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I couldn't imagine, like you were saying, doing a project where I just didn't follow those sustainable parameters. I think I would be I don't know what I would do. I mean, I guess I wouldn't do it because it's just embedded in what I do, and it sounds the same for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, for me, I've declined clients here because they don't go align with
Yeah, good
my
for you.
principles.
Good for you.
I mean, I'm in
Must be
a
hard to
like a
do. Must be hard to
privilege.
do that.
It's hard. I think I'm in a privileged position because there's not much competition here. So I've
Mhm.
placed myself in a context where it's either you take it or you leave it. But at the same time, in Indonesia, in this context of tropical climate, you don't need to spend a lot of money on insulation or big, thick, like thermal mass walls or heating. So it's cheaper to achieve sustainability, I think, in this context. But
Yeah.
also, they are my principles. So it's either you take it or you leave it. I can't do anything
Yeah.
differently. Um, so yeah, Bambook at the beginning was just purely design and built. But,
Mhm.
we were always implementing, like I said, many passive design strategies to minimize consumption. We're following all the steps of sustainable design or a sustainable architect might follow and consider all the externalities, all the negative impacts. We've done the first net zero projects here, but also personally, like as Paula, I'm also doing a lot of sustainable consulting.
Mm.
Recently, there is a boom on that, even here in Indonesia. So I'm helping business create like their true sustainable project, like understand what it is. Many people want to do it, but they don't really know how to achieve it. What does it mean? If it's possible, how you operate it. Um, so I'm always looking for, more challenges. I'm also consulting for a big plastic recycling company from the UK who are here in Indonesia. They're a large recycling center in Surabaya. So I'm helping them with the roadmap, which is basically to implement in Lombok and Sumbawa is the same province. Um, Plastic processing plants. So I'm designing those plants with them. And, architecture can help in so many ways. It's
Yeah.
not just building, it's also helping other companies achieve their goals. Um, like since a few years ago, I've been doing so much pro bono myself because I'm always have this feeling that I'm not doing enough. So I did the first facility for organic waste conversion center here next to where I live. It's a 1 ton a day based on insect farming with luxury fly and still up and running. I founded the Lombok Eco Flea Market, which is like a community of vendors that only sell earth-friendly products. So we created these principles, and right now this has created this incredible group that keeps growing, and that it's like a movement of eco warriors that are
Yeah, you're going way beyond
collaborating
architecture here. You're going
way
into
beyond. There's so
yeah, you're
much to
going
do.
into
I
a
always
lot
feel
of
like,
things.
who's gonna do it if I don't do it?
Community organizing, you're getting into that.
Yeah.
You have
Um,
activism roles. It's really impressive.
yeah. Right now, we just signed an MOU with the University of Mataram, because we want to help them to create plastic neutral locations with this Honest Ocean, this company from the UK. There's a MotoGP racetrack here, and we are trying to tell them, okay, let's do it. Let's make the first racetrack plastic neutral. Then you learn, we'll be your mentors. You learn how to do it, and then you can implement this elsewhere in Indonesia. So it's all these ideas that, actually the government takes really happily, and um, they always, want to collaborate, and they welcome the help. But, at the end, it's like another job that I do just for the sake of the planet.
Because you're not doing enough, right? That's why you're doing it.
It's never going to be enough unless we
Yeah,
really can change things. So
it's
I
true. You
always
gotta
feel
keep
it.
on working on it till it changes.
And I am a truly believer that a lot of the things that are needed now is action based.
I
So I
agree.
consider myself a climate activist, but I'm not on rallies or social media. I'm not really big on that. I'm not a millennial. I don't really, I'm not really into marketing and communications, but I'm more into action.
Yeah, getting your hands
So
dirty.
yes, and I feel many times very lonely here in Lombok
Uh,
where I am. Um,
because
eh,
there's not a
you
lot of
know,
people doing what you're doing? Is that why you're feeling lonely or
Yeah, like in general, I think this is like a sample of the miniature of the world where you can see the impact in your face very
yeah.
clearly. But a lot of people are just like really minding their own business, or they would expect that government will solve their problems for them, which is
Yeah,
really unlikely in this context. And,
right,
a
it
lot
won't.
of them would be like, oh, oh, look at the beach, so dirty, so much plastic. But it's not like they're really taking like a lot of action to change the problem.
No, not
They
really,
have
and
better things to do.
yeah, and with, like, what you just said about feeling lonely, I mean, this is when I get to talk about climate and sustainability on my podcast. I don't have that group here in town where I live locally, so I have to talk to you in Indonesia to 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 really get into this stuff that I care about, so I definitely can relate to how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing on your like you went to education, now you're communicating. Everything is needed. I
Yeah.
don't think one person can do it all, but the main point is just like there's always something more you can do.
There is, yeah, and that's how this podcast came to be really because I'm teaching this and I want other people to teach it, so I'm gonna make something that can help them do it. So, I
Exactly.
feel like, yeah, we have the same mindset on that.
Yeah, I think, in that way we're really connected. And I heard a lot of your previous podcast, and
Did
I
you?
think everybody's on that. Yeah, I just heard the Jamie the other day.
Jamie Alexander,
Which
to kick off this season.
yeah,
Yeah.
what she's doing is amazing. And then you recommended another podcast the other day. It's not yours, with the producer of Kiss the Ground, which is one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and you
Infinite
you can
Rising.
see, the main common denominator while we're doing very different things is the action. Is the
Right.
I needed to do more. And I think that's something that this podcast is really, kind of like promoting. It's
We
like,
are.
look,
Yeah.
people are not scared to get out of their comfort zone and do more.
Yeah, I don't wanna go to, like, a conference panel and just talk about this. I wanna go to a conference panel with people, and we create a plan, and we do it. That's what I wanna do.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm tired of talking about it, although not with you, because 'cause we're action-based, and this is, an important thing to push forward is we need to do something.
Yes. But
Yeah,
you're like the vector with your students, and because this podcast is so many people doing things. It's great because the you communicate to your students like, look, this is possible. This is you're like the vector between real action and people that are interested in that. And in the future, there'll be the hands that will be the professionals to really implement and change things, you know? Like we were saying, there's generations above us that have no clue about this.
True. Yeah. And one thing that you just brought up there was my students. And I wanted to ask you something based on a project that they always propose to me, and they never quite get there. And that is creating net zero architecture. And
Mhm.
you did that with your home. So I'm wondering if you could talk
Yeah.
more about, first of all, what is net zero architecture and
Okay.
how do you do it? What kind of suggestions can you give someone who maybe wants to try that on their own?
So net zero, it's quite easy to understand the concept of it, and it refers to a building or a project that can produce in within. So in terms of architecture, would be on its site or as part of the building systems, all of the energy and water that needs to operate. Whatever activities happen inside. Um, so the first thing to design a sustainable building is to try to lower by, implementing all of the passive design strategies and things that don't need artificial machines to provide comfort. So when you implement all of those strategies like good orientation and, in general depends on the context and the climate, obviously will be different. But once you reduce the demand from the building, then you can implement the technology to be able to treat all your water and reuse it or install renewables so that you can produce all the electricity that your building needs, etc. Um, but net zero is this concept that leaves behind a huge part of architecture, and that's the whole impact of the building process. So
Right.
it really doesn't account for the construction, which is, a huge amount of emissions worldwide is one of those huge sectors. It's not just the activity of the construction itself, it's the manufacturing of the building materials, it's the transport of those building materials. It's one of those sectors that generates the most amount of waste, and it's huge in resource depletion. So when you do net zero, it's great because the building will be living for like 30, 50 years so that you're
Mhm.
tackling that, but you're not really considering the other impact associated to architecture, which is the whole construction in general. No. So
Yeah.
um the rule is to, they always in my university they explain this thing like you don't want to fall into the fat-free cake syndrome, which is, oh, it's a fat-free cake, so I'm gonna eat two pieces instead
Oh,
of
I see
one.
what you're saying. Yeah. I've made that mistake
Yes.
many times.
Yes. So if you're going to design a net zero, you can be like, oh, well, it's going to be a net zero. So I can just like, boost the AC and stuff. You want to reduce your consumption first, design for minimum consumption, and then you apply. And if you can apply, let's say, like, oh, look, to run my building, I only need 10 solar panels. But my roof, I could put 20 solar panels. Of course, it's going to depend on the budget and your client and all of that. But if you were to install 20 solar panels, which is double of the amount of energy you would need in your buildings, you could export that CO2 emission free electricity to the grid. So you're actually positive. You go from net zero to net plus, which means you're contributing, you're helping elsewhere, not just your
Yeah.
project. So this is why it's really important to not fall in the fat free cake syndrome, and always try to also reduce your consumption first. That is easier and cheaper to achieve net zero, and it gives you the opportunity to go for
Yeah, that makes
net
sense.
zero plus.
Can I
Yeah.
ask you about the fat-free cake analogy there? And so I remember reading about this project, this architectural project that was done, and the way that they were claiming that they reached net zero is that they planted a certain amount of trees afterwards. Would that fall into that fat-free cake, or would that be okay?
Yeah. So net zero refers that you produce within your site, with your building, all of that. When you are planting trees and all of that, you're like offsetting off grid, right? So you're trying to compensate the carbon emissions that you produce. It's funny because all of the reforestation programs, if you want to get carbon credits for it, because they will be doing a job, there is like an offset of 5 years. You don't get any money or carbon credits for 5 years since you do the reforestation program. And, it's also funny because it's quite tricky to get carbon credits on existing forest when they are actually capturing more carbon than the reforestation
Yeah.
programs.
Hmm.
But I think you have to do it within your project. And then if you want to participate in reforestation programs, and I think most important is preservation, because right now we are in this situation that this is happening in front of my face here, in Lombok, where you have farmers and people that need living. And the only way they
Hmm.
know how to do it is to cut the forest and plant monocrops. And they get heavily incentivized by all of these corporates, like Monsanto giving seeds and fertilizers and chemical herbicides and
Yep.
all of that.
They get trapped then too with the Monsanto
It's
product.
so difficult to avoid that,
It is.
because a forest is not really providing them an income. So there's a huge, wave change now with agroforestry, and in reality, it's like soil management and ways of managing forests and agriculture so that you don't need to cut the trees and sell the wood, but you could make income from the forest within. In general, in architecture, I think, you can buy green electricity, provided by renewables. And all of that is good for offsetting. But I think the main exercise is to really try to reduce your impact. Even
Got
if
it.
you were providing all of your, everything that you need, all your electricity, your water comes from a super sustainable source and it's not polluting. I think the exercise is to try to minimize, be more efficient, and need less, live a low impact life, which is what I've done with my own life. That doesn't mean that you need to go in a cave and, and do nothing. It's,
You
like a
could.
lot of people would be, you could, but it doesn't mean that.
Pretty
I think
boring.
everybody just needs to focus on improving.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, hey, what can I do better with this part of my life? And I talked to someone, I think of the first season of this podcast where I talked about how I was just trying to eliminate plastics from my bathroom. That was like my first,
Hmm.
and then that led me to other things. So I like
And
that.
you learn in that
Yeah,
process, right? You
yeah,
become aware, you learn. I think learning is something that you can't stop doing. It's so enriching. And actually, because I wanted to learn for the lead exam, that's how I got into this. And in
yeah.
sustainability, everything is sustainability.
Mhm.
So I think doing those little steps in your personal life, like what you're saying, it also leads you to learn more. And then,
Yeah.
was it hard to do it? Did your life change completely? Was it like, a horrible transition to go through, an adaptation?
No, not at all. I mean, it was just, it cost me a little bit more money sometimes, but then I was finding other things like, oh, I could do this in the kitchen. The kitchen's a lot harder, is what I found out. But, you
Yes.
know, but yeah, it wasn't hard. It just took time.
Yeah. So imagine if you need to do that in my context where you don't have waste collection.
You don't.
No.
Oh, so you don't want to have waste at all in your situation, right?
Yes, because you have to face your impacts so
God.
much more here than
Yeah. I
what
mean,
you would do in a developed country.
yeah, we don't have, I'm in the US, right? Like they take the trash away is how we view it. And unless you're living by the landfill, you don't know what happens to it. And it doesn't really bug you or bother you because it's gone every Tuesday or whatever.
Exactly. Which
Yeah.
is another thing that I learned in my master. That's a definition for that. It's called the flush and go. You
Flash and
flush the
go.
toilet, you go.
Oh, flush
You
and
don't
go.
want to know. Yeah, you don't want to know what happens next.
Oh, no, I don't want to go to a water treatment plant. No way.
Yeah, but we have always this impression that, okay, well, you throw your garbage, it goes whatever, who cares? You flush and go your toilet, it goes whatever, who cares? You think, oh, for sure my government is doing everything to be as clean as possible, as
Mhm.
sustainable as possible. But are you really sure?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and one of the main things is that doesn't allow you to face your impacts as much because you just flush and go. You just ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's this distancing thing where if you don't see it, it's not your problem.
Exactly.
And you don't really want to see it, I think, in most cases. We'll take a quick commercial break here and then get back to the conversation.
Where do young designers see themselves at the intersection of climate change and innovation, and how can we teach that intersection in the classroom? Designers are problem solvers, capable of imagining solutions for a more sustainable future. My name is Rachel Cifarelli, and I'm part of the Climate Designers New Wave team. In the past few years, New Wave has released 2 reports exploring students' experiences of climate design education, or lack thereof, and what they hope to see in their classes. Now we want you, design educators, to use this research in your classrooms, and this summer, we're giving educators a chance to talk to the New Wave team directly. Twice a month, the New Wave researchers will be available to walk you through our findings, answer any questions you have, and help you implement actionable project briefs directly into your classroom. We'll also show you how to use our media kit to easily share the research with your students and how they can sign up to be a participant. Head to climatedesigners.org/edu/newwave to sign up for a call with the New Wave team. Help us inform a new wave of design education, one that teaches every designer how to be a climate designer.
Graphic design history is messy, it's incomplete, and it's full of overlooked, underrepresented, and ignored people and topics. Incomplete Design History podcast explores those topics and talks about those people to deepen and expand our knowledge, understanding, and interpretation of the history of graphic design. Season 1 and 2 are already available, covering women from graphic design history and BIPOC designers and design culture. Be sure to subscribe to Incomplete Design History wherever you listen to podcasts and get caught up before Season 3 drops in the fall of 2023. INCOMPLET Design History.
You sent me when we first met a video of your home, that your net zero home that you built, and I would love to share that with my listeners on the show notes if that's fine with you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because it was really amazing to see how you did it and what you used to do it. And I think, of course, right, you're using materials that are indigenous to where you live in your area, and you would
Yes.
obviously recommend that, for someone like me living in Illinois, I would look to materials that are from my area to do that.
For sure. I mean, you want to locally source most of your materials. That doesn't mean that 100% of it needs to be locally sourced, but you need to go through the exercise of, where are your materials coming from? What's the embodied energy of those materials? How can I achieve the performance that I want with
Right.
those materials? I think that's an exercise that it's needed to do by all architects. And, you base your decisions on a lot of things. Cost is one of them. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's not realistic and it's not possible to do things that you would want to, but at least you're making an informed decision and you are like contemplating all the aspects. It's not just like, okay, whatever, I'm going to use this and I don't care where it comes from and what's the embodied energy and who produced it and all of that. I think this needs to be part of the equation of the design process.
Yeah, when you talk about every day or every step trying to get better, what resources or where do you look to help you do that within your own design work?
Well, I obviously like you consider all of the, main disciplines that you need to look at, like site, uh, a building footprint, materials, water, energy, passive design, and waste. So in all of those, you look in different, aspects of it. But the main primary exercise that you would do since day one, and I think in the US might be a little bit harder to do, but in here is really easy, is to look at how were they building 100 years ago?
Nice.
Because, a lot of us and humans are, I consider that we're so full of ourselves. We believe that technology is going to save us.
Mm-hmm.
But in architecture, when technology came in and with the whole modernism movement, suddenly performance wasn't part of the equation because you could implement machines to, give you the climate comfort, and no one was thinking of how much electricity was using and how were you producing that electricity. And, everybody was more thinking of the modernity. Oh, we can use steel structure. Oh, we're going to separate the structure from the curtain wall. Oh, we're going to use glazed buildings. And actually, my thesis in my master's was about that. Like we have all of these skyscrapers worldwide that look exactly the same. And they are, from Dubai to San Francisco to New York to Shanghai, places with, radically opposite climates. And yet everybody's using the same curtain wall design. And ignoring the impacts that has in the environment, in the form of
Right. Yeah.
energy use, to climatize. So for me, I feel that, the modern world made architecture worse, less resilient, more energy dependent, and globalization. It's not possible in architecture. So to go back to your question, the first thing you need to do is look locally. How were you doing things back in the days? No. So for example, right now I'm in the process of designing my own home, another home in Spain. And it's the best exercise for an architect because you're your own client and you can do exactly how you feel you want to do it. So
Right.
this is going to be in Spain. The exercise to work in Spain compared to Lombok is completely different. This is a place with winter in Spain and the seasons, and in Indonesia, you don't have that. You have a tropical climate with monsoon 6 months and then the dry season another 6 months. But temperatures are always like from 28 to 30 degrees, very constant.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to do it. And I want to go for, I always think that bioconstruction is the best material source because, anything that is bioconstruction means that you didn't really need to manufacture heavily to produce those materials.
Oh, that's what it
So
means.
my house,
Bio construction.
yeah, it means that you're using natural materials. So my house in Lombok is bioconstruction, is made out of bamboo.
Bamboo. Okay.
Bamboo from Lombok, right? So it's locally sourced. Bamboo is really sustainable. Then I'm using wood, and my walls are done with sun-dried clay bricks, also from Lombok, right? Of course, I use a little bit of cement in the foundations and things like that. But when you use these local materials, you know that the manufacturing process of those materials is minimum. So before you build, you already know that your impact has been really low. And then another thing was that I built the house with a screwdriver. So, the process of
What does that
building,
mean? You built it
yeah,
with a screwdriver.
that was the only machine that we used to build my house.
Oh my gosh. Just
Yes. So,
your forearm and a screwdriver.
yes, because, everything is like designed kind of for disassembly. And then, honestly, I'm so remote. So I didn't have the electricity source to do it the other way, So, so I'm thinking on where the materials are coming from. I'm thinking, how am I going to put them together? What's going to be the energy usage and water usage during the process of construction? And then after, when I'm living in the house, I'm obviously, the house was designed studying solar movements and airflows and, all of the passive techniques. We've been building a lot of tree canopy to shade, strategically shade. And when you use the house, you have to open louvers in the morning, close them, like it's interactive. But then, because I don't need a lot of energy and I don't need air conditioning in the night because I have everything is open, cross ventilated with mosquito nets. So, I can be very comfortably opening all the windows and let the air flow without thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get all the mosquitoes in and things like that.
Yeah, that would be a
All of,
terrible thing to wake up to.
yeah. So, and then I have a solar system that is really small, but it's enough to run my whole house. Recently, we built a pool. My son is 7. My husband was like, we need a pool. I was, all of these things, it takes me like 2 years to just get my head around it because for me, it's going to be like, oh my God, more water, more electricity. How am I going to
Yeah.
do it?
You try to be
So,
net zero.
yeah, so I implemented an ionizer in my pool to like reduce the amount of chlorine. So that way, when I do my backwash, I can put all the backwash water in my wastewater gardens and reuse all that water for irrigation and for my toilets. I run everything solar power because my consumption is so little. I don't need to spend a lot of money on a solar system. And, like everything is considered. So when you want
I
to do a
did.
sustainable projects, you consider everything. I have chickens. So all of my organic waste goes for my chickens. We have a huge flood. I don't want to use a diesel, run grass cutter. So I have goats
Yeah,
who move
that's
around.
perfect. Yeah, like just buy a few goats for for your yard. That's amazing.
Yeah. So at the end, every little thing you think about it.
Yeah,
And it doesn't mean that you can be perfect, but you do as much as you can, And in Spain now, I need to do the same exercise, and I'm considering building with the straw bale because it's also a grass,
propio. Yeah,
it's a natural material. I want to live in a healthy house that it's, breathing walls. Um, and of course, I looked at the traditional architecture in that area, how they orientate their homes, where do they open the windows, what materials they used back in the days. I want to do a structure for like wood structure on the roof and the clay tiles on the roof. So at the end, it's really an exercise of looking back, seeing how the vernacular and the old architecture was made, because that was really providing good comfort without the need of heavy artificial machinery. You want to go for materials that have a low embodied energy. So if they are not natural materials, I mean, you need to really look for what's available. I think in the US, it's really easy because you have a lot of wood. Where is the wood coming from? And how can you improve, the operations later while you live there? What machines can you implement? Some things might look like they cost a lot, but when you look back of how much money you're going to save on your bills, this is how you want to present it. Because,
yeah.
if you have a payback of like 5 years, 6 years, it's totally worth it. Because then your building is going to be like, 20 years? Like, I'm always thinking, like, I want to create a home where my son in the future doesn't really need a lot of external input to be able to be comfortable and, live,
That makes
well.
sense. Well, it sounds like
Yeah.
your home is the project in there in Indonesia is very important to you, and I'm guessing it's one of your most successful projects when you think
But
about
it's
it.
your guinea pig, when you do it
Yeah,
for yourself, you try and you're not scared of telling clients do that, So for me, it's great because I try it first on my own risk. And then you are really well informed when you can propose these solutions to other clients.
yeah. And they look at it and they say, "Oh, do that for us," right? And it extends
Hmm.
the possibility of
Exactly.
doing more net zero architecture.
Correct.
Well, you're also you told me about a circular economy ambassador, and you do this on top of everything else. Like you said. And can you talk to us more about, first of all, how you define the circular economy and how that relates to some of the other work you do at your studio?
Okay. So, yeah, in 2007, and like I said, I love learning. It's something that I keep doing on my own time. I participated in a boot camp that I heard on the radio, and this boot camp was going to train 300 participants, which were previously selected to learn and become ambassadors of circular economy. I had never in my life heard that term before,
Yeah.
but the headline of the program was Barack Obama. They were like four other Nobel Prizes, two of them Nobel Prizes of
Some
Economy.
smart people
They,
there.
yeah, very smart people. They were representatives of the UN, of the World Bank. We had a lecture that was wonderful from the Ministry of Happening of Bhutan, explaining about other indicators rather than GDP to measure wealth and well-being. So it was like a weekend of a lot of learning. But the main message, and this is the circular economy, what they were telling us is that we cannot continue with our current linear economical model. We need to transition to a circular economy. And I think I heard you previously in some of your podcasts how Cradle to Cradle book affected you.
Yeah, it did.
And to be honest, this is exactly the same. This is
For you?
circular economy. No, circular economy means cradle to cradle.
Yeah.
It means design for waste out. So, for me, it was really important to hear these very high profile personalities that are running and that know stuff, especially like two economical Nobel Prizes who are telling you that the linear economy that we have now that is based on this idea of constant growth, that, where we take from resources, we manufacture, and then we throw away, that this model, that gave us so much wealth for like 50 years, right now brought us to the big environmental trouble. And it's, the cause of a lot of the problems that we have now because of, it's a consequence of this linear growth idea. And it is a problem because in a linear economy where we throw everything away as waste, and, we're the only species that has garbage.
That's true.
And we've created a lot of garbage. I mean, it's not
Too much.
minor, and we are still believing that in this planet, which is finite, that we can have a model of a production model of, where endless resources come to us and we can throw them away as if, we keep having more and more.
Yeah.
And,
One day
right
it'll be
now,
gone.
exactly. And these high personalities, they can see it. They see that the economy model is based on an illusion that cannot be, sustainable in the long run, and that we are running literally right now out of those resources. So
Yeah.
the circular economy, what it's saying is that we need to look beyond the take waste model, and that we need to look at nature, because in nature, and this we've learned at school, like everything in nature is circular. Like we have the water
Mhm.
cycle, the nitrogen cycle, like we all watched I explained this in schools, like in middle schools. And I asked them first if they saw The Lion King, because Mufasa explains to Simba exactly that we all belong to that
I remember that
cycle,
movie.
natural cycle. And yet humans, we've based all of our human enterprise is based on a complete opposite paradigm. And that's really that idea is really what is, bringing us to collapse, because we can't continue with that same model, but we could thrive. I mean, we could thrive in a circular economy model.
Yeah.
It's not like we need to go back to like prehistoric times, not at all. Nature and the world is so rich and can provide so much. It's just that we need to base our whole design and our whole economical model on the three major principles of circular economy, which is the first one is we need to protect and care for the earth resources,
Okay.
which it makes sense, right? We take everything
Yeah.
from nature. So, how can we protect, care? How can we improve? How can we regenerate those earth resources that we keep taking? The second is that all of the things that we manufacture, all the products, all the components, the materials, anything that we use for our enterprise and that we consume, it must be either in the biodegradable cycle or the reusable cycle. And this is exactly the message of Cradle to Cradle as
It
well.
is, right. Yeah. The bionutrients and the technical nutrients, I think, is what they use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need to design with this idea. We need to design with no waste. We need to consider the life cycle of a product and what's going to happen after. We need to design for disassembly. And we need to take out, and that's the third principle, the negatives out of the system. We cannot ignore the pollution. That's a way of garbage, contamination, the depletion of the resources, the social impact of all of our actions. It's really important that when we design, we consider for those externalities that we've been ignoring for decades. Like, for example, Coca-Cola is selling all of their Coca-Cola worldwide in their plastic bottles, they are creating a huge problem of plastic pollution.
Yep.
They need to be responsible to consider that, and I think this is something that it's major and that is huge and that it's the only way we can make it happen. I don't know if you heard of Jared Diamond. He wrote a book. It's called Collapse.
Yes, Jared. Yes, I have cited that book in many things that I've written because it it kind of frightens me to to be
Yeah,
yeah.
yes. It's frightening, but what he really explains, it's what circumstances brought different societies to collapse. And then if you combine that, with this other guy, Jeremy Riskin, who was part of the Circular Economy Bootcamp, participated in his book, The Third Industrial Revolution. I mean,
Great.
in general, what they're really saying is that humans or societies go to collapse if they are holding on to an idea that brings them to collapse. In our case, it's this idea of infinite growth and linear,
Yeah.
And it's funny because they explain it with a similar sense, like imagine you are in a boat and there is a huge rock of gold, like pure gold, and the rock falls, out of the boat and you jump with it and you grab it because you're thinking of, oh my God, this rock is so much wealth. Imagine the amount of things I can do with the money that this rock, it's going to provide to me. So you're grabbing this rock, but you're sinking with it to the
Yeah.
bottom of
Yeah.
the ocean.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what they're saying is that you're not tied up to the rock. You could let it go and come up. Yeah, you're giving away and giving up the wealth that growth could provide to you, but you will survive only if you let go of it.
Yeah, that
You know?
reminds me of the book Ishmael, where there was a similar analogy to between flying and free falling, and the what's the difference between flying and free falling? Well, when you hit the ground, right? And we may
Yeah,
think flying high and we're doing really well, but we're actually free falling off this cliff, and
exactly. It's exactly the same.
it's exactly the same. And
Mhm.
that's why that book scared me, because it was showing history of where humanity has failed numerous times and how,
Mhm.
we're on the same path.
And it is funny because when you hear about other societies collapsing, you think to yourself like, oh, I mean, how could they not see it? I mean, why didn't they do anything about it? And we're literally in the same scenario.
Yeah, we are. And climate change is, and has been, I should say, slow. And all these slow moving things we tend to ignore, right? And now it's moving much faster, and it's harder for us to ignore because we're experiencing it. Some of us are experiencing it every day.
And it is really here. I mean, I remember talking to my cousin. He was telling me he has a huge company of renewables. And he was telling me like 4 or 5 years ago, in 5 years, we're not going to be talking about anything else than climate change. And yesterday, I sent him a screenshot of this big Spanish newspaper because everything there is all about the drought now and how we're having fires in
Mm.
April already and how we are on a heat wave in April. They're reaching 40 degrees Celsius in April. And, right now it's like a country that lives heat waves of 6 months long with no water.
Yeah.
Um, and people are like, oh, it's the drought. But, it's really not the drought. We've been saying that this is going to come for a long time. And the
Yep.
actions is what they're lacking.
Decades. Scientists have been saying,
Yeah.
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 Well, this show is one of the part of the mission of this show is to share with our audience that despite all of these negative things that are going on around climate, we have the solutions in front of us to combat a lot of these problems, and it's just a matter of willpower to do it. And that's what you're doing at Bambook Studios, and I'm very impressed by it. And so I'm wondering, uh, what's next for your studio, and at what point will you say, "Hey, I've been successful at this"?
That's never gonna happen. the the
Never
complete
gonna.
like, oh, I've done enough.
Yeah,
I don't
because
think
you
that's
have to
ever.
do everything apparently. So yeah, I could see why you'd answer it that way.
But also, I think like it's grit, you know? It's like there's always things you can do better or improve. And, I mean, we're talking about all of these world problems. There's a lot to do. So, I'm a little bit restless. My personality is like that.
Okay.
And it's so enriching, when you do good work. And, this is like in any sense, whether it's, when you go into charity or you do anything pro bono or you're helping in general, I think that's really enriching and it makes you enjoy your job a lot more. Right now, in Bambook Studio, we've been working for 6 months. I honestly don't want to design anymore and build buildings that are not designed for the circular economy for disassembly. So
Yeah.
I am transitioning to a circular architecture only. We are focusing in Indonesia, no, where I have my resources here. I'm focusing on sustainable source wood, and we're working on a range of prefab modular wood houses designed to the best standards for providing, all of the thermal comfort that I need and very well designed for this tropical context. But again, I want them to be built with a screwdriver because I want to minimize the
Yeah, I
impact of
like that.
construction. It's great. I think that's really good when you consider the impact of the machines you're using at construction. And I obviously want to do net zero and I want to minimize the amount of cement and steel using the project. Um, so I'm launching this, soon. I'm already building 3 of them. And I would like to move
Oh,
my company just to do this kind of architecture and then obviously sustainability consulting for other projects. I think I've been doing 10 years more traditional design and builds. Yeah, it was sustainable, but I was still using concrete and steel architecture. And I think I'm ready to move to the
move
next
on.
step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this happens for you because I think it's going to be inspiring for a lot of other people to follow this path. And then we're headed in the right direction for sure if that happens.
Yes. And I always tell my team, like, we'll do this, and in 5 years, everybody's going to be copying us. But in sustainability, there can't be competition because the ultimate goal is that everyone does it like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was
So
always
you're
confused
setting
about
the path.
yeah, I was always confused about people who got really competitive in the field of sustainability. I don't know why. Maybe it's just part of being part of the capitalist system or something. But
Or
I'm like, hey,
humans, no? I mean, I think it's part of
yeah,
our nature. But
I guess
that's
so.
why a lot of women are really powerful on this movement because I think women for, millennia, we've been a bit more like put aside on the job of nurturing and, there wasn't that much competition in our nature because of that. And this is a really important message because we need to do this collaborative
Yeah,
exercise
I agree.
together. And we all need to learn from each other. I was listening to your podcast with Jamie Alexander and how they do open source. And I think this is
Yeah,
really
so
important
great.
if we really want to accelerate the action and the transition.
Yeah, open source. I mean, I believed in that since I was in grad school, and
Hmm.
so yeah, and that's another reason too. You pointed out like why we have this season dedicated to women at the forefront of climate action because there's so many of them, and they're really leading
Hmm.
the way.
I think, besides the fact that, by nature we're a bit more nurturing, also it's because there's not all dogs sitting on high chairs on the sustainable path because it's such a new thing. So it's helping, like I was 30 working in CH2M Hill as the lead of sustainability in their office, so it was giving me an opportunity to climb up the ladder, like the professional ladder, a lot faster because there weren't like a specialist older than me sitting there. So that's why
Sure.
it's really also rewarding for students because you're entering into literally like an unknown territory for the older generations. So you
Yeah.
have this enormous opportunity ahead of you to lead and like do things differently, not only considering sustainable and low impact and all of that, but also different in the way of how we collaborate with ourselves, and we organize ourselves in a much more, less competition, much more collaborative, much more result based than, like general impact based. So
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's like a huge change on paradigm. This, I don't know how you pronounce that word um, in English,
Paradigm.
but yeah, like changing the
Paradigm.
paradigm, like the capitalist world, as you said, it was all about like being super successful. And I think here the success is to be like community success more than personal
Yeah.
success.
No, I'm
Because
I'm
at
on the
the end
same
of the,
page with you on that.
yeah. And I think that's another thing that we need to also change in our mindset, like we have a huge thing. Maybe during World War II, like everybody was a lot more, like focused on that, more like community and achieving things
Mhm.
together. But the aftermath of that was really an individualist world, very
Totally
profit
was. It was like
based,
an explosion of
yeah,
let's spend as much money as we can.
and considering zero externalities, just money as
Yeah.
the only one indicator, which is a little bit like funny because we all know that money can't buy happiness. That's like the typical sentence we've heard forever.
Yeah.
So
It's
why
not.
would we focus only on money?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Well, I'm keeping track of time here, and we're coming to the end to uh, one of my favorite questions, but definitely one that I ask everyone. And I'm excited based on your experience and how you're an action based person on how you're going to answer this. But you've been in design school, and so you know what it's like. And as an educator, teaching classes, it can be ups and downs, right? So I'm wondering if you were asked to step into my shoes and be a design educator, what would you assign the students? What would you have them do?
Well, I mean, as an assignment, I don't know. But look, what I said before, we are working with the University of Mataram here in Lombok to do plastic neutral locations. I mean, at the end, you can teach anything or assign them anything. But I think as a base, what we were talking before, they cannot design without the circular economy principles behind.
Right.
So everything needs to be designed following that because that's the future. The second thing would be to consider every single externality and the life cycle of whatever project they're doing. But again, you don't need to only work on architecture. It could be anything. We're talking that we need to transition from a linear economy to a circular economy. Someone needs to design how is Coca-Cola going to take back all of those containers and shampoo, bottles, and reuse them? Or how are they going to transition into a zero waste, So there's endless, the whole system needs to be redesigned. The whole product,
Yeah.
every single thing needs to be redesigned to be designed for disassembly. Every single thing needs to be redesigned to be able to reuse all of the materials. And on top of that, we need to decide how are we going to mine the landfills and recover all of those thrown away,
That's a great question.
yes. And it's so much design work. I mean, everything is design work, but the main thing would be to consider circular economy and nature. We need
Mhm.
to work aligned with nature because nature is, it's like the base. It's literally the chessboard. It's how the earth system works. Um, and we need to be aligned with it because if not, we're literally killing our host. But in general, another thing that I think it's really important to tell design students is that your path is not just like one path. Like, look at your career, Eric, or mine,
Mhm.
you keep learning as you go and you keep finding your passion. And as long as your principle and your base is the good base, is the one that it's the way to move forward in the future, with what we're talking about sustainability and low impact and circular
Right.
economy. And as long as that's really imprinted on your principles, like your ethical code is there, you could do anything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be like, I'm an architect and I'm, designing plastic neutral locations, sometimes. And I'm creating eco-flea markets. Like, you can do anything. And there's so much to do. So I feel like, my trajectory started with corporate, then on my own. Now, I'm trying to do better. It's, like, don't be scared of saying, oh, I did study this thing and actually I don't like it. You can keep learning on your own. And as long as your core values are there, like your sustainability regulation is really imprinted on you, then you could do anything.
That's true. That's great advice. And coming from you, who's proving it right in the world, and I really appreciate you being on Climify today. We're both action oriented people. I've learned,
Yes.
and that's my advice to you out there listening: is get moving. There's a lot of work to do, and it's
A
exciting.
lot.
Yeah, your ideas for the class project. There's like you said, thousands of ideas there in just that one paragraph. And that's exciting, right? And if you think about money, there's a lot of money still to be made redesigning everything.
And, like based everything on GDP and money doesn't really give a true picture of
That
the
too.
well-being of the societies,
Of course not. I guess if you want to convince some business people, then you use the money equation, right?
Yeah, we use the money equation on the life cycle, on the payback, for the investments. But, like, how can you monetize a healthy building? It's really
Yeah, you
hard
can't.
to prove it.
Yeah.
And yet we have a pandemic, and then everybody's like, oh my God, our buildings are very healthy. And, it's things that are important.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paula. It's been wonderful talking with you. Before we go, where can we find you again online?
Yeah, so I'm in bambookstudio.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn as Paula Huerta. And hopefully soon they'll be able to listen to this podcast and,
Yeah,
get inspired, because honestly, we need an army here. There's so much to do. So, don't despair, keep going. And, the only way forward is where all of the young people and the new generations really start small movements, community based, and want to do more and learn more and just keep going and keep going and keep going until we achieve it.
I agree. Thank you, Paula, for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Eric, for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
This podcast is co-produced by Bianca Sandico and me. A big special thanks to Ellen Keith Shaw and Christine Pilot for their gorgeous work on our new branding, Atul Rashik and Mark O'Brien for their continued design help, Brandy Nichols and Michelle Wynn for their strategic guidance and always supporting me on this podcast. If you enjoy the work we all do here and you have a spare minute or two, we would truly appreciate it if you left a rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. The more folks that review our program, the higher the algorithm pushes up Climify in the search results. And in turn, the more likely we all can learn how to become climate designers.